In my early 20s, I received a craniosacral therapy and myofascial release session following a car accident where I was not badly injured. But I felt all kinds of other benefits where it just seemed like my head was clear, my heart was open, and I had energy like I just didn't have on a regular basis. And that treatment was given to me by a former chiropractor who had then just transitioned to much more of an osteopathic style of craniosacral therapy. And that led me to getting interested in doing that work myself. And it turned out that I was just very naturally gifted to do that work. I think most simply, craniosacral therapy could be thought of as creating elasticity and bandwidth in the spinal system to support the flow of cerebrospinal fluid, which is going to replenish new neurotransmitters and detoxify old neurotransmitters in the brain, and then also allow for graceful function of the central nervous system. And you see a whole host of benefits that could most easily be characterized as the body working the way we would hope it would. All the elegant millions of little processes that happen on a minute-to-minute basis happening as we would intend them to. So I'm looking at the whole body itself, as well as the electromagnetic field surrounding it. So muscular tone, how tight or loose our muscles are mediated by something called the ground substance, which is a watery fluid filled with things called glucosaminoglycans or water magnets. So when a muscle relaxes, it gets soft, and that's because it's being filled up with water. And so this tone is basically gripping all of our nerves. Traditionally, craniosacral therapy is just going to focus on the pelvis, the spine, and the cranium. My approach is much more holistic, and I find that little influences and extremities can also have a big impact in our core balance and the alignment that seems to be so important to our autonomic function. So not only just the whole body, but also the energy field, the electromagnetic field that surrounds the body can all be important elements to address. But basically, I'm just finding the places in the body that are tight and then giving a light holding touch for an appropriate amount of time to stimulate a durable release. The way in which I work with bone is that not a lot of people think that there's a tight and a kind of a loose state that bones can be in. I have a perspective through practice that all tissue can harden and soften, and all muscles are anchored to bone in at least two places. So tension tends to be dynamically stored throughout all different tissues, and insofar as bone alignment is part of my practice, I really achieve correction of misalignment through evening out the tone in somebody's body, and then through movement on the client's behalf, bones tends to find their happy place shortly after a session. So fascia is a global continuous network of incredibly strong material. Fascia has 5 to 10 times the tensile strength by mass of steel cable, which is just incredible. Whenever you're chewing through steak and you get something stuck between your teeth that just doesn't chew on well, that's fascia. So it creates an amazing amount of structure in our body. And when you look at a live cadaver with a very strong microscope, you see the fibers of fascia gliding in a way that would mimic what we would think of like a super advanced, space age material that has aspects of both a liquid and a solid, meaning that the fibers of fascia can move along one axis, and then all of a sudden the axis of movement becomes the axis of stability. And when shock enters the body, you get a freezing of that fascia. And all of a sudden you can't just move in multiple dimensions gracefully like we see in children who don't have a major injury. The amount of dysfunction that creates in the body, we don't fully understand all the mechanics of, but we can appreciate that it seems to create a dramatic and undesirable aging or infirmity in the body. Anything that seems to be toxic, whether that be extreme force, chemical toxicity, biological toxicity, radiation, excessive amounts of fear or trepidation, hatred, all these things seem to have a curdling effect on fascia. It seems to create a lot of contraction. And that has all these symptoms that are undesirable associated with it. Almost any pathology we can think of is also accompanied by a tightening of this tissue. And when you alleviate that tightness, you seem to see a great improvement in the symptoms of all pathologies. So very simply, you can think of like the Chinese meridian system through the body, all these channels of energy, or you can also think about it, efficiency of flow of information. The fascia is gripping all of these pathways. When it gets too tight and inflexible, it seems to have a very undesirable effect on just the flow of communication, flow of information, flow of fluid through the body. When you ameliorate that, you seem to see a return of function and a dissipation of the pathology. From my perspective, I have not found anyone who is dealing with an acute pathology where there is not an accompanying acute tension surrounding the area of concern. Additionally, when you alleviate that tension in the area of concern, you see a desirable effect on the condition. So in the most broad sense, this is an extremely fundamental metric of health, which I don't think is understood at this point very well, because the way that we're measuring it isn't creative enough. And it also, there isn't a pretext for giving credibility to the tension in our body having an extreme medical significance, other than these older ideas like we see with the Chinese medicine meridian system. The difficult thing about modern myofascial therapy is that in the English language, we can sometimes assign different meanings to the same words. And high quality, outstandingly effective myofascial release, in my experience, seems to be a gentle holding with the Goldilocks zone of pressure, let's say firm enough to feel therapeutic, but not anywhere close to make you recoil, for many seconds or a handful of minutes at a time. And over that period, you see a gentle melting of the body into the practitioner, rather than movement coming from the practitioner pushing on the client. And in this way, it's creating a level of support and an invitation for the tissue to be able to reset back to its initial state before there was a shock or harm that created this bracing for the body for, a major reason to stay in one piece, which evolutionarily makes a lot of sense. So most people who I see are frustrated, have been struggling with health issues for months or years without any results, who have spent thousands or tens of thousands of dollars and haven't gotten any better. I work with a lot of people with head injuries, chronic migraines, knee problems, back problems, issues with digestion, anxiety, depression, a whole host of a very wide range of issues. And the arc of treatment typically is from 1 to 10 sessions. Typically, people see a significant improvement in 1 to 3 sessions. I focus on a few major muscle groups. One would be the iliopsoas, which is kind of our human tenderloin, our primary muscle of fight or flight. And the erector group, the paraspinal muscles along the spine, the muscles of the head and neck, and also within the feet. So the low ankle joint seems to have a significant importance in storing almost all of the tension in the body seems to refer to that point in the body. I would say more than anything, what I have found most astounding is the alleviation of grief. And that seems to have a home in the body after we experience great loss or something terribly upsetting. And relieving that clenching on a visceral level seems to be extremely liberating to wounds that some people never imagined could get better. I've helped a lot of people with chronic digestive problems, alleviation of migraines, where people, have suffered from those for over 10 years, which is, again, it's like giving somebody their life back. Alleviation of knee and hip issues. So again, people feeling incredibly liberated to live their life. Plantar fasciitis, bunion problems, which are just, again, incredibly limiting. You don't appreciate all these little parts of the body until they start letting you down. Challenges associated with tremors and seizures, where you see acute tightness around the pelvis and or spine and head. And it seems like those conditions really are chronic aggravation of nerve tissue. And it's just overstimulation. And the body's just basically going into a crisis. And kind of just nervous system computing overload. We aren't taught to think of organs as having any kind of looseness or tightness. With pathology like you see in IBS or Crohn's, chronic inflammation, chronic stagnation, constipation, you see a tightness along the lower back, around the abdomen, and affecting, all the lower viscera, as well as the upper spine. Usually there's a lot of tension around the liver. And when you get things flowing, there tend to see a lot of correction, normalization of elimination, better digestion of food, and less chaos happening